everybody, welcome back to another video, and today we're going to continue the conversation about bits, bridles, bosals, that sort of thing. We made a previous video. They got a lot of response and some reactions from people about the difference between a snaffle bit and what I refer to as a bridle, meaning a shanked bit, a leverage bit. And so today I'm going to add in kind of from a practical situation of somebody that trains horses every day on a regular basis. When would I choose to put that horse in a snaffle, a bridle, a bosal, that sort of thing? So typically what I do is I do a handful of rides with a horse with a halter, with a rope halter. And I do this because I usually want to get riding them. And when I'm first starting to ride them, it's more about them getting confident with a human on their back, learning a little bit about leg pressure and going, and just getting them to generally accept the idea of being ridden. Once I'm past that point, that's 10 rides or so, the horse is definitely doing walk trot, being ridden in open spaces, maybe or maybe not cantering. I canter them earlier on or later, depending on the individual horse. I really believe in the idea that 50% of horse training is teaching horses what we want them to know, and the other 50% is trying to not teach them things they don't need to know. So if I'm on a more of a snorty, spooky, reactive horse, and if I canter them and they're really scared, I can canter them. I'm not worried about falling off. That's not the issue. But I am worried about teaching them to get more reactive during canter. And so that particular horse, I might wait a little longer to canter them until they're a little bit better prepared so they have a better experience when cantering. And I find that this maybe looks slower to some people on the onset, but the reality is 2 months later, I'll have a horse that lopes around nicely and is very calm and confident at the canter because I waited. And so in the long run, I find that technique pays off. And getting off subject a little bit. Now, one of the more challenging maneuvers to teach a horse, but also one of the more important maneuvers to teach a horse in the scheme of their development is a walk to canter transition. So a canter transition is a lot of times where the rider gets off balance because the horse trots off really fast and the horse is thinking go faster instead of change gaits. And so that's one of the things that I put a lot of emphasis on in my training is developing a nice soft canter departure. And the way I do that is by asking them to have vertical flexion and step off into a lope. So vertical flexion doesn't mean collection. It means that the horse is giving to the bit and they're putting their body in a position where they could understand change gaits, maybe a little bit more than change speeds. So it kind of signs them up to that idea a little bit stronger. Now, I may or may not start doing that in the snaffle. So let's say the horse has 10 rides or so in a halter-ish. And then I'll probably put another 2 or 3 months of training on them in a snaffle bit where I'm doing a lot of lateral. And I'll start introducing the idea of vertical flexion around ride 40 or so. I'm giving averages. Some are earlier, some are later. Depends on the horse. And then I'll go into the bridle. And so I go into the bridle because that helps with that vertical flexion. Again, that doesn't equal collection, but I also think it's out of sequence to start developing collection early on when the horse just doesn't understand basic yields. And so I like to teach them all the yields where they may or may not get emotional, and we kind of work through all those things and then start to ask them for collection later on once you have that foundation of confidence and foundation of yields. I find that if a person, and there's a lot of people that disagree with me on this, that's fine. If that suits you better to do it, you can do it differently. I'm just sharing how I like to do it. I find that if I were to start trying to develop collection too early, every time I ask my horse to do something that they don't really understand how to do mentally, then I'm going to lose the collection and I'm going to struggle teaching them maneuvers. So I'm dealing with two problems at the same time. And so I find that in the end, that is the slower approach. Now, some people might go, well, it has to take that long. Maybe, maybe not. I think a horse can learn a lot of things very quickly if given the opportunity to. So to each their own. You can do it how you want to do it. I'm just sharing how I like to do it. And so I'm going to start introducing vertical flexion into my transitions, okay, and also into some movements, maybe in a leg yield, maybe in haunches in, maybe in a turnaround. I'm going to start asking that horse to stay in a little bit of a frame. Again, at this point in time, I'm still not having collection. And I'm not naive to think that I am. I'm just starting to get the horse to understand and be mentally, emotionally, and mentally willing to put their body in those positions so that we can have more success. And then later on, I can have a very specific question about collection as we're going out, as we're moving forward. So let's say that while I'm asking that horse for vertical flexion in a bridle, that horse is really struggling and wanting to nose out. And maybe or maybe not, I get a few of those transitions, but at the end of the ride, I'm sitting there saying to myself, I don't think the horse understood what we did. I got their body where I wanted it, they did the thing, but I don't think there was a mental connection. I'm not interested in that. I want connection. I want the horse to mentally understand what it is that I'm asking them to do. And so if I feel like the bit is stealing attention, because something in their mouth can be very distracting for them, that's when I like to go to the bosal. So that's one of the big reasons why I would start riding them in a bosal. And bosals are really good for vertical flexion. This one I believe is a 5/8. It's kind of a good just average. I have smaller ones, I have bigger ones. But a 5/8 I think is a good one to kind of get into to start with. It's kind of the right amount of pressure. And this, because both reins are connected here, it kind of has a similar feel to a bridle where the rider needs to have better hands, better timing, set up the horse's body position where they need it to be. But because I don't have anything in their mouth, I find that I can have a conversation and, in the words of Ray Hunt, get the message to the feet a little bit better in a bosal than a bridle. Now, there's a lot of horses that I skip the bosal on. There's a lot of horses that I skip something else on and I go to this. It really all depends on the horse. But I would encourage people to experiment and try different things. Don't get stuck on one thing because you may not know what tool your horse would operate better in. For a more novice rider, this is good for your horse in the terms of you're out of their mouth and you're not riding on the reins telling them to slow down all the time. The downside is you're going to have a little less control in this because you're probably going to teach them to lean on it because you are picking up the reins and asking them to slow down here and there and just kind of having some bad timing. That's all okay. It'll work out fine. Another reason I might ride in a bosal is, let's say I have a greener horse that I'm going to take out on a trail, or I might do some roping off of them. I don't want to accidentally pick them up if they spook, or if I'm roping and I make a mistake with my hand. We all do sometimes. I don't want to pull on their mouth when I didn't mean to. And so I want to be very deliberate about that. So I might put a horse in a bosal if I'm going to go try to get a job done on a greener horse. So those are kind of some of the reasons why I would ride in a snaffle. Snaffles are great for lateral. I do this for all my cow working and cutting, who I've learned a lot from Doug Jordan on, who competed always in a snaffle bit. Shout out to Doug Jordan. And I ride in a bridle when I'm mostly trying to have a conversation with the horse about vertical flexion in my maneuver. So I'd already have taught them the maneuver. Now I'm trying to get more vertical flexion in that maneuver. If I feel like the bit is stealing their attention, meaning I'm not getting a connection to the feet, I might go to the bosal for those kind of scenarios. One other reason I just remembered that I might go to a bosal in is maybe somebody else has already started that horse and put some riding on them and taught them some things they didn't need to know in the bit, got them scared of the bit, got them putting their tongue over the bit, got them getting emotional and kind of frothing at the mouth. I might pull that horse out of the bit and teach them to understand the rider's seat and legs and focus in the bosal before I put them back in the bit. And those of you that are sitting there thinking, oh, I hate bits and I would never do that, well, that's fine. You don't have to ride a horse in a bit. I would have no problem. You know, my favorite way to ride a horse is on a loose rein and teach them to ride off my focus and my legs. But I appreciate the value of teaching them to be in a frame, which again, you don't have to do in a bit. You can do it in a bosal. You can do it in a bitless bridle. You can do it in an X-string. You can do it however you want to do it. That's everybody's personal preference choices. But I do think different tools help us communicate different messages to our horse depending on what our goals are. So hope this information helps. And let me know what you guys think in the comments as always. And we'll see you guys on the next one.